That's a huge green flag if someone can resolve conflict. You asked me that question, what are men looking for? If I didn't say challenge, I would say the ability to resolve conflict. Let's unpack gold digger. For me, I'm okay with a gold digger as long as they've got a heart. What I will say about the sort of polyamorous setup is there's a lot to be learned from it, even if you're in a monogamous relationship. It cannot work without high-level communication. If you have a primary partner and several lovers or whatever, or you're both sort of actively dating, in order for that to work, you have to be able to communicate on a high level. You have to communicate boundaries. You have a relationship with jealousy that you've got to deal with. There's a lot to learn.
On today's episode, Johnny Cassell, a leading dating coach for men, author and coach. Johnny, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for hosting.
You are going to be the window into the minds of the men for us today.
Am I?
Yes,
Okay.
I hope you will. So let me start with a very easy one. Johnny, on behalf of all women, what do men want most?
Well, it's a question that I ask everyone that I work with. We do all the superficial stuff, of course, but then, what's the makeup of someone? The character traits, the personality. What do you want from someone in a relationship? There's many common things that come up, but one that really jumps out the page is the word challenging. And that's not to be like, oh, I want someone that's abrasive. It just means that someone that can give you a bit of that pushback when you need it. I think in relationships, we all kind of test where the line is, and we do sort of, F up from time to time. And if your partner's not really going to call you out on that sort of stuff, you then learn to do it again and again and again. And what then happens, you lose respect. And if you lose respect, then you lose attraction. So someone that challenges you is important. It doesn't mean we're going to steer it into an argumentative place. It's actually a healthy thing.
This is already revolutionary. Thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that up as the first thing, because I see this, I've definitely recognized this in myself, in my past, and I see it all around where women are so petrified from saying something, from making a wrong mistake, especially if they really like someone and it's that stage in a relationship where you're not really sure where you stand. They avoid conflict at all costs, where it's exactly what is the downfall if you keep not speaking up for yourself, as you said, because there's loss of respect at some point.
Totally. Like, it's worth having an uncomfortable 5 minutes versus an uncomfortable next 5 months. So the real risk is not having that conversation.
Definitely. I remember from my first relationship, in a whole year's time, we never had one argument.
Wow, okay.
It's bad, right? Like, it's bad.
Well, I mean, I'm waiting for you to...
In hindsight.
Yeah, I don't know, was it?
Well, it ended.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, right? Mm-hmm. But at the time, the thoughts in my head were, I was trying to be considerate and I was thinking about the other person and, I was thinking, okay, well, he's so busy. He's got so much going on. I don't want to kind of load up even more and burden that person with my stuff. And at the back of my head, obviously, there would be some things that would annoy me and I would just hope that they would go away. Which in hindsight, of course, it's so silly and so stupid. That's not how it works. Whereas when you have those uncomfortable 5 minutes and you have a little bit of that friction, you become closer after that.
Totally. An argument is a good thing. I think one's ability to actually resolve conflict is so important. It's certainly something that I'm looking for. When I go out there in the world of dating, like if we have a conflict of values and opinions, how are we resolving? How are we getting to a place of a softer landing? As opposed to just it being some emotional outburst and, irrational situation. That's a huge green flag if someone can resolve conflict. You asked me that question, what are men looking for? If I didn't say challenge, I would say the ability to resolve conflict. We're all emotional beings, but, how well can you address?
Yeah, how you navigate those moments when you have that burst of whatever it might be, like passion, anger, rage, but are you able to control yourself and actually navigate that in a civil way? Yeah,
I mean, arguments aren't about you always being right, and it's like phrase of, losing a fight to win the war. Yeah, sometimes you got to say sorry. Like even if like you feel that no, like I'm really stubborn on this point, like this is my belief, like okay, but have a bit of empathy and see it through their lens, and maybe just sort of a sorry is enough.
Absolutely. And also what you just said about not entering an argument by trying to win it, that's a game changer. Because so many people do that, don't they? Whereas if you enter in any argument, discussion, even out of the context of a romantic one, with an open mind and actually seeking to almost be proven wrong, because that's how you can learn more, that's a completely different approach, isn't it?
Yeah. Amongst my friends, I just call that an idiot. Or an alpha asshole. It's just trying to alpha the situation, but you're not actually right.
What about London in specific? You know how they say, at least I hear this all the time, and I think so as well, it's notoriously hard to date and find somebody in London. Do you agree to that?
It's not hard to find someone. With technology and where we are, it's now easier than ever to be connected to anyone and to appear on the social graph. You got to look at it like if you think of a network, you think of nodes connected to each other. Well, the tools that exist in our society now easily can put us within that graph or give us an idea of how to get close to that certain node or person that we'd ideally like to get to know. For example, just to simplify, if you look on LinkedIn and you look at that right sidebar, I'm not sure if it's still there, but there was a feature that says, you're one person away from getting to know that person. I just see that as everywhere. If I have a desire to meet a certain person, I'm thinking of it practically. Who have I got to get to know to get to that person? And I share that with my clients as well. I think what's difficult when you're starting from zero coming into London is the lack of community. So I would say is just don't focus on dating, focus on building a community first. And if you don't know how to do that, always go to hobbies, always go to learning, because if you're learning something new, you will find community around it. If you've lost touch of community, it's probably because you stopped learning something new. If you meet someone in that community and it doesn't work out, you've always got that community to step back into and find someone else. But also as well, it's going to serve you later on down the line, because what is attractive for anyone coming into your life is that nourishment they get from having a social life. And if you're also providing that, you've got friends, you've got hobbies, you've got interests, something that you can include them in, then they can see the bigger picture, and it's just another attraction switch. That was a long-winded answer to your simple question, but there's a lot of valid tangent.
Definitely very valid tangent. And I think I haven't thought about this in a long time, but that's very true. When I meet a man and I get invited to participate in whatever activities with their friends, I feel really nice. I feel like I'm in the right place because I belong to something. And exactly as you said, that person has already a world that's, interesting to me. So yeah, I don't think we as women think about that enough.
It's like church, right?
Yeah.
I don't particularly follow a faith, but when I go to church because of friends, christenings with babies and stuff, or weddings or whatever, you go there and you look around and you start to realize what people get out of it. And it is that sense of community, that coming together, that belonging to something. And it's just such a innate need in all of us that I guess we kind of forget. But as I say, it's valid for anyone coming into a big new city. I went to Lithuania and I found my love for longboarding. And I went to this park and you could do anything. You could pick up an electric bike, you could skateboard, you could roller skate, you could push bike, whatever. And I was like, oh, what am I going to get around on here? And everyone's just so active out there. And it's longboard. I'd love to see myself on one of them. This is going to end in disaster. And it didn't. I actually had a really great time. I got so much joy out of it. And then when I got back to London, I was like, wow, how do I get in touch with people that do this? And I just went on Facebook and I just typed in longboard groups, London. Up pops 3 or 4. I joined one. I haven't got a longboard. Joined another community to buy one. So I made friends with someone that's selling the boards. He's already in a community. And the following week I joined one. And then there you go. That's just a perfect example of how easily you can tap into a new community starting from zero. Just find a hobby, find an interest. Don't have any, try a lot of things.
Very, very useful. But if we go back a little bit to the, let's say, more conventional, what people associate to when they say dating. So say, let's go to the dating app kind of area. I feel like these days we have this problem where men and women, to be fair, have this lack of stamina and endurance within relationships. You say, okay, you meet somebody on the apps or whatever, you meet them, and then you start dating, and then at the first gust of wind of inconvenience, people are like, okay, well, next now. There's this ability almost to endure any sort of discomfort within a relationship because there's so much available. We're spoiled for choice, and we think that there's always something better around the corner.
I think that's absolutely valid. That is true. And I think what governs your change of attitude is possibly your age. I'm guilty of that. Like, I've done that a lot. But then I don't learn anything new about myself by continuing that pattern. I think we come to a point of realizing, like, I can't keep on doing that. Like, I actually need to double down and actually weather the storm with these inconveniences, these arguments, these indifferences. Because if I can't, then what does that say about my ability to hold down anything with longevity? So I think, yes, we all have the luxury of doing that right now. But when you put it upon yourself to realize that you want something a bit more and something a bit more deep and meaningful, then I think you will see a change in your character. So I do think it's about, you might just be like wanting to build up your experience, so you put up with that behavior of yourself. But how long are you willing to put up that behavior of yourself when you change what you want?
So how you do anything is how you do everything. So I think if people have certain tendencies in their professional, personal life, then they're also going to transpire in romantic relationships. So if they don't have this ability to endure discomfort and challenges in other areas of their life, then that's probably going to be the case also in their romantic life.
Yeah, I think that's valid.
But what I'm also thinking is, what about those examples where this is not the case? So say you have these, CEO executive, really high stature people. And obviously they have this great success professionally. But then when it comes to relationships, it's like they feel so entitled about their other accomplishments that they feel like maybe in a romantic relationship, the other person should concede or should accommodate them because of their fame or their money or whatever else. What about those situations? Are they wrong or how?
So you're talking about entitlement, right?
Kind of.
They feel entitled, so because I've achieved
So they're capable of holding down any sort of hardships and navigating difficult situations, but they are not willing to in a romantic relationship because they feel like I've done so much more in these other areas of my life. Why should I be trying here as well? You try.
I'm not seeing that in my clients, but maybe those sort of people need to become my clients.
Clearly.
I mean, I work with some people that have achieved amazing things in their life, and I don't know whether it's because of the way that I teach them and how to be ethical and how to communicate values and how to communicate something when it's not working. I don't feel like I've worked with someone that's got such a sense of entitlement that worked against them. It's just not something I've come across.
You work with a lot of international clients and you've built yourself a very great reputation as the leading dating coach for men in London and internationally.
Thank you.
So how did that all start? What was the journey? And when?
First project's yourself, right? Like, you can only really teach to the depths you've gone yourself. So I had to walk that walk myself first. As time's gone on, I've picked up a lot of knowledge on psychology and how to read situations, analyze things. And, if you'd asked me this question, I don't know, 8 years ago, I would have told you that reading a couple of books on dating was...
But how do you go from knowing about these things and being interested in them to actually working with other people and helping them and putting yourself as a figure of authority forward them?
Well, when I started changing the way that I was approaching social situations, I started seeing results. And what I mean results, for me back then, was just simply girls responded to me differently. Like, actually, I was capturing their attention. They seemed interested in what I had to say. So you were actually running experiments. You read something, you learned something, and you were like, let me test this. Yeah, I was out like 5 nights a week. And to be honest, not much has changed for 15 years. Well, a lot has changed. But I've got a lot of data of human interactions because I've personally put myself, and I see patterns in the way that we communicate, and I see what works and what doesn't, and what stimulates us and what doesn't, why we want to see someone again and why we don't. Why do we want to see someone again? Because there's more to learn, right? If you give everything away about yourself so instantly, why does it make sense to see someone again? So mystery. Well, the mystique does play as definitely an attraction switch, but I believe you can build chemistry with anyone, but it's the compatibility element, but we'll get to that. So yeah, it was going out there, picking up all the data. I didn't want to share it with anyone, to be honest. I was solving an issue that I had in my life, right? And my history up until then was, I studied motorsport engineering for 4 years. So I had that very sort of solution-based kind of mindset, like an engineering person would have. I went to an all-boys school for 5 years prior to that. and introductory school was mixed at very early ages of, say, like, I don't know what age you're at, were you like 5, 7 years old or something? Like, psychologists claim that around that sort of age, that is where you are indoctrinating a lot of things into your subconscious, right? And that can set you up for your trajectory for life. And I was actually bullied by girls at that point, like physically abused. I was coming home with like bruises all over myself. So that stayed with me and lodged in my subconscious. And actually, well, like, this is what you learn about yourself when you study, you psychoanalyze yourself. And me remembering about that made sense as to why I had resistance towards interacting with girls whenever really I had the opportunity, moving up through, going up for the years, and also just the lack of.
Did that build some sort of resentment towards women, or was that more just an avoidance to avoid?
Avoidance. Mm-hmm. Never felt resentment towards women. Naturally, like any young boy, just intrigued by the being, So yeah, I got comfortable with it all and started to see some differences in interactions. When I was coming to the age of sort of 18, 19, so to speak, and didn't want to share it with anyone. Then realized like that's a really crappy attitude to have, because you just kind of hit a ceiling with anything you're trying to get better at. 2 brains are better than 1. Selectively picked friend out of a social group that I used to frequent, and I taught him everything. And we used to go out like pretty much every night of the week. And because he was from a different social circle, like I was more sort of into like the commercial scene back then, like going to like the R&B clubs and sort of mainstream stuff. He was more sort of like the indie alternative scene. So we had a really unique crossover of just going like that every week, and that's what caused the acceleration curve.
Okay, so when does the client onboarding, like professional going into that lane, come in? Because that's you having results, that's you now involving your friend. When does that become a business?
So I start teaching my friends. Like in my social circle, I was like, okay, wait, I'm seeing people that are coming out of relationships, they're deflated, they need to be picked back up. And I was solving those issues amongst my friends. So that was a nod that I needed to say, okay, you're not just making progress for yourself, but you're actually aiding others. This is what you do. That's the confirmation I needed. I'm not nowhere near where I needed to be myself in my own journey, but that's great for, I can pass on what I currently know. And again, like going back to social networking, it allows you to connect with absolutely anyone. So like I just added everyone in my industry. When Facebook was coming out, I added everyone in the industry. I was peering through a lens to see what was going on, who was moving in and out of different companies. And I saw an opening to volunteer for an event. And I was recognized there to be someone that knows what they're talking about.
So you gave speeches?
I did demonstrations at that event. And then the attendees were vouching for me to be an instructor, basically. And then I came into that company. I became their head coach.
What's the company?
Cassell's company. And became the head coach, head of sales, head of running all the pro, like wore every single hat. It's like her left-hand guy, right-hand guy. And then just the demand just got so much, like for myself. So come to a point in journey where I had to jump.
Okay, so that was your entry. And so what do you think allowed you to have success? What were the characteristics, or what were your kind of special things about you that allowed you to be really good at what you were doing?
The problem solving. Like I said about that solution-based thinking. Like if you go back,
you saw an objective and you figured out how to.
There's always a fix. Like if someone brings their car into the garage and you take the engine apart and then you put it back together and something doesn't sound right, you don't just send it out the door. That's madness. Like there's a problem to be solved. There is a solution. So you just start with everything you know and all the data you've collected and all the patterns you've experienced. You should be able to solve it.
So at the time, I imagine that things are different now versus when they started in terms of your methods and what are clients coming to you for. But what was the problem then? So I guess what I'm asking in a way is, were the majority of clients coming for you for strategies and ways to essentially get laid and pick up girls, or to find long-term love from relationships?
Yeah, well, this is a huge misconception because getting laid is part of it. It's not the goal. And to be honest, there's a lot more affordable ways to go and get laid rather than go and see me. Seriously.
Good point.
It's getting over that fear and that resistance of presenting yourself to someone you find intriguing, because you've built up such a complex perhaps from past experiences and trauma. Like my one was the early days of being at school. When I got over that, that doesn't exist in my life right now. But some people have some even more extreme ones, that we work with and help them get over that hurdle. So there's a lot of internal stuff that we help them with. Remove all these unwanted thoughts, replace them with positive, actionable self-talk, your real-life reference points. So when they do have elements of doubt, they've got so many reasons as to why they can. The self-belief, the conversation techniques and skills, so they actually can put across their true self. You know, and if it works out with someone, maybe they will get laid, but it doesn't stop there. It's about how you continue and nurture that relationship moving forward. How do you turn this into something tangible? How do you make them want to see you again? Like, how do you resolve the conflicts and indifferences? And what I deal with now is just, I take a client, I completely design their lifestyle from scratch. This has evolved from what, is what you're trying to tap into. Was this something that was just teaching guys how to pick up girls at the beginning? A lot of the marketing was built up around that.
Yes, because I think, obviously, I don't know, but I can imagine that there's an evolution in one's journey, in one's profession. So obviously you've been doing this for a very long time, and I can see how everything that you're putting content on right now is really about completely changing, a man's philosophy and his life for the better in 360 degrees, the self-belief, the confidence, which transpires obviously not only in a romantic context, but also in anywhere in life. So I can see that. But as I was doing research, right, on you as well, I found the Kezia chapter, and basically I saw that on the website there was kind of your profile and saying that you're an amazing part of their group, that some of your skills were same night lays, threesome closing, and rapid number closing. So what obviously comes to my mind, but not only in this case, but as you said, there's a lot of misconceptions about dating coaches in general, is these moments, right? So I'm thinking, what about the ethical aspect of maybe thinking about women that are on the other side of these highly trained men to seduce them? How does it work when you're there? You're the person that's training these people. What does the training consist of, and what is the purpose of that training? Do you know what I mean, right? So is it just purely that, and are they trained to, deceive women in giving it to them and then leaving them and gaslighting them? Or is it more to that? Is it really training them to, become great men and, take care of their relationships?
I mean, okay, so...
Sorry, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, no, first point is I'm not part of that company and haven't been for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, that's 23. They were quoting you when you were 23 years old. So
right, so I'm 34 now. So sure, as 23 years old, getting a girl's number is exciting. Having such and such sexual experience, well, still exciting. But of someone that's been doing something for that long, as you said, like the focus of coaching evolves because you evolve as a person. It's like certain rock stars, they retract certain comments that they once made when they were, young and so it's a similar sort of thing. So you can have all sorts of experiences and there's no deception going on. There's never ever been, women aren't stupid. They're incredibly intuitive. I love and respect women. I have female clients. Recently had a client from the LGBTQ community too. At the end of the day, it's a woman that makes a choice on what they want to do, and they can sniff a bullshitter out. All the people I'm working with are incredible people. They really are. There's no need to deceive or bullshit or manipulate or anything like that. They already are like a great package. Their communication skills, or what they're holding on to a lot of the time, is holding them back from the other experiencing that version of them.
I want to hear a little bit more about that journey of your growth and evolution from that point to where you are now, because I can see, a stark difference. Of course, you've evolved, you've grown, you've matured as well. And one of my favorite questions to ask, and what I always ask all my guests, is, what is your purpose?
No, on purpose, I'm living it. Like, this is, it's a cliche, and I hate to always say this, but like the whole follow your passion thing, I found it. And I found it at a very young age. I was blessed to actually find it at a young age. And I just knew that was it. That's my lane now. Like, that's the lane. And I've stayed in that lane since I left college. There is nothing else. There's little side ventures and stuff that I get involved in as a byproduct of the stuff I do. But, like, my purpose is I'm in it. I am deep in the vinyl groove of that. And it sounds great.
So it's essentially helping men find their voice and find love.
Yeah, majority has been men. As I said, though, like majority of my career has been teaching men because that's the path I've gone myself. But then I've had women that have been intrigued about my work, and then they found themselves having my teachings work for them. As I was saying the other day about the LGBTQ guy, like when I got that inquiry in, it was like he was inquiring about my coaching, and he's like, "Oh, there's one other thing, like I'm gay." I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Here's the deal. Like, there's a lot of stuff I can teach you. You know, like I can teach you about communication, chemistry, how to build it. That other bit, I'm sure you can work that bit out yourself. Like that's not something that I honestly can't share my knowledge of that." And it was a fantastic experience, like working with that guy. It was really refreshing for myself and my team, because it made us realize everything that we've been doing for so many years, you know, helping mainly hetero people, is just instantly transferable. We have the same issues, and
the psychology is the same.
Yeah, like this guy was, you know, going to like the gay bars and the drag nights and stuff. It was such a good week, and yeah, he just had the same sort of resistance as you know, approaching someone that you found interesting.
What was the moment, the biggest breakthrough moment in your career, you'd say?
There's many, and there's always a ceiling to smash,
but something that really changed something for you.
I guess normalizing beauty. And I think a lot of men will be able to relate to that. The media do such a great job of elevating beauty as its status. And when you see beauty, whether it be in magazines, on TV, or on a street, it's almost like automatically you elevate it and minimize yourself. And psychologically, what that does, it pushes you further away from actually even having anything. But what that person actually wants is just a normal interaction. They don't want to be celebritized in that moment, you know?
So not glorifying beauty and kind of...
It's just got to be your new normal, you know? Like if there's certain superficial aspects you like in someone and you recognize them, then that needs to be your new normal. You know, you really need to treat that as normal. And when I started doing that, I genuinely started having real interactions with those sort of people.
I guess it's the self-belief that you're on the same level, essentially.
Same to be true with anyone, like not necessarily just beauty, but people that have achieved incredible things. You know, you might be in the same room as someone that you really look up to, done amazing things in their career, or maybe they're a public figure, and the same mindset applies. Yeah, it's helped me out a big deal. Some people may call that an imposter syndrome. They may feel like good enough or worthy enough to actually present themselves in front of that person. That the automatic thought that is triggered in their head is, oh, well, why would they? Yeah, they wouldn't want to speak to me because I'm not on their level, or oh, they're out of my league. That conversation is ridiculous that you're having with yourself.
That's such a relevant topic for me. I realized very recently that I've kind of been staying away from that term for a very long time. But very recently I had this thought that actually I've been having this for a very long time, and I just didn't realize that I did. I thought that's just part of how I feel. But I don't have this with other people. I've always found it extremely easy to walk up to anyone, and whoever they are, extremely, you know, famous or whatever, anyone, and strike up a conversation or make a connection. But it's more kind of self-related. So basically self and achievement versus the what could have or what I should have. It's more, I guess, relative toward that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But should we talk about that in our session?
I mean, should word could is like,
yeah,
should just be, that's vocabulary just needs to be removed. What does that allow you of? Doesn't allow you of any action, just procrastination language.
Very true. Well, actually, I have a question.
I
have loads of questions. Another one. So obviously you're an expert on love and on relationships. Have you found your love?
Many times, and I don't think you stop finding it, you know, like if you allow yourself to receive it. And for whatever reason, sometimes that we've had bad experiences and we shut down, that warm heart takes a bit of a beating and it turns into a bit of, you know, gets a bit frosted over. I love hard, and I've had a lot of relationships, and when we speak about patterns, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate to this because this is just something that exists. When you come out of a relationship, I think what a lot of us try to do is replace instantly what's just departed, right? So it might be, and I was having this conversation with a colleague of mine recently, you know, he came out of a long-term relationship, he met someone new recently, you know, they've had a bit of a fling and they experienced intimacy together. And she called him out. She goes, "Have you just come out of a long-term relationship?" And he was like, "Yeah, how do you know?" And the reason why she said that was because when they were making love, he was very sort of attentive and, you know, basically trying to replace what he'd lost with his long-term partner. But sometimes you might come out of a really chaotic relationship, like crazy relationship, and then you pour that straight into the new one, and like, yeah, that can happen.
Baggage.
Yeah.
Unwanted baggage.
Yeah, like just being irrational and, you know, just having these out of characters because that's what you've come from. So my point being is, like, it's really important to, the next relationship you should have whilst jumping out of a long-term one is one of yourself. Go and take yourself out on a date, go for walks, go to do social stuff, get in contact with friends and stuff. Just date yourself, and as long as it takes.
What about people that are so used to being alone because they're so comfortable with being in their own company, and it's hard for them to actually get into a relationship because they're so used to their own space?
This is a very valid point. I was speaking to my friend about this the other day. So I'm not going to take credit from this quote. This is from him. But he's like, yeah, sometimes you can feel lonely and down, depressed, and you feel like you're just sitting in the woods for ages, and you've got to get out of the woods, but you know that you've got to get to the side of the road.
What if you like the woods?
Well, you clearly don't if you're complaining about it, right? Yeah, if you really desire companionship or any sort of social comfort, you've got to get out the woods to the road to actually wave down a passing cab. And I heard him say that to a friend of mine, and that hit different.
It is a good one.
It's just so valid. We'll feel like that at times. You get into a bit of a rut, and you stay at home. Maybe you just consume yourself into work or whatever, or you're down about a past relationship. You don't want to see anyone. You just have this sort of negative coping mechanism. But you just got to start saying yes to those invites again. You got to reach out to those more social friends in your network. And maybe the first couple of times out, you don't have a good time. You just got to get that cycle back going again.
Is there such a thing, because we're talking about love, and obviously what I had in mind is there the one? So is there such a thing as the one, or is that a fantasy that we're created?
I think we've got to be careful about over-romanticizing stuff, because you can really get caught up in, and I did a post about this last year, I think we can get so caught up in the poetry and the idea of something and forget about the practicality of something. When I mentioned earlier about chemistry, I can teach people to have chemistry with anyone. I'm 100% confident on that. Where you are and where that person is in your life and in their life, and what your values are, and maybe what those values then evolve into, then that's different. Then you were talking about compatibility, proximity, where you guys live, how you're making that work. Mentioned about family building at different time, all these different things. You can still love that someone. You can still have that love, but is it compatible? And I've had to sever certain relationships, not because I fell out of love, because it had to get to a place where it was a fork in the road. Are we going this way or are we going that way?
Those are heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's when life really sort of slaps you in the face and basically says you can't control everything. As good as you think you are in terms of knowing it all, you can't have this.
Those are, I think, one of the most painful situations where, you both love each other, but then there is some sort of a circumstance that just makes it impossible.
Yeah, it could be possible, but you realize you've been incredibly selfish steering it that direction, realizing what that other person would be giving up.
Also very true. Speaking of this sort of dynamic and tough situations, the whole concept of monogamy versus polygamy, where does the truth lie? What is the right way? Are we meant to be with one person, or are we forcing ourselves against the nature laws? What's the right way?
It's a big, wide question. I don't think there's a right answer. It's not black and white. It might be that recently I've been in conversations with a lot of people that subscribe to the poly lifestyle, and it's interesting because it has become more mainstream over the years. Certain public figures have come out about their sort of we see David Hay in the paper the other day with his two girlfriends in Morocco or wherever he was. It creates more conversation, it creates more curiosity to exploring that relationship model. It comes with a lot of challenges. What I will say about the sort of polyamorous setup is there's a lot to be learnt from it, even if you're in a monogamous relationship.
How so?
Communication. It cannot work without high-level communication. If you have a primary partner and several lovers or whatever, or you're both sort of actively dating, and in order for that to work, you have to be able to communicate on a high level. You have to communicate boundaries. You have a relationship with jealousy that you've got to deal with. There's a lot to learn. I would actually go to say, there's a great book that I recommend all my clients to read, not because I'd say that's the relationship model that you should follow, but it's a book called Sex at Dawn. And, some people might say it's polyamorous propaganda, but just read it to understand the communication and how important it is, and you'll learn a lot about yourself in any relationship. you know?
I was going to ask you about communication as well. I mean, men and women definitely have very different communication styles. How can we bridge and ensure that that communication is successful and we get our points across in an efficient...
Be brave, because like a lot of the things that we're too scared to communicate end up being the reasons why we're actually going to have that argument, or worse, break up, you know? And it's not even like, it might be just like a petty thing around a house that you don't like, you know? Or it might be someone's not pulling their weight in your relationship, like helping out. It might be a desire, you know, it might be you want to see them plan more. It might be you want for them to communicate love in a certain way, how you like to receive it, and they're not quite understanding it, you know. It might be how you're making love. You know, I've had it where the men and women I've worked with, they've been unsure how to correct their lover or their partner's technique because they don't want to offend them. There are ways of doing that, and we go through it, but like the consequences, if you don't communicate how that's done right, then
probably a breakup.
Yeah, you're going to find it elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
So just be brave. The real risk of, as I said earlier, of not communicating is...
I think this is where that irrational fear once again comes in of, okay, if I say this, I'm going to hurt that person. If I say this, they might leave me. But as you said in the beginning of the conversation, that's precisely what you need to be doing. How do you find that courage though?
By thinking of the consequence.
Of not doing it.
Consequence of not doing is an encouragement to do. Like, if you think about it in a work context, if you assume your colleague, like, for example, okay, we mentioned about, earlier on off camera, you mentioned about the editing procedure of this podcast. If you just assumed your editor knew how to edit it, it would come back on your desk. You'd be pissed, right? So there's a level of communication that's involved to get it right and how you want to put it out there. So we understand those rules in the professional setup. We just got to take those rules and apply them in our personal setup.
Yeah, there's this whole massive tippy-toeing around feelings. I think we don't even know how to deal with our own emotions, let alone with other people's emotions. So that's why we're so like deer in the headlights.
Yeah, I mean, we care and we love that person, but simply put, like, even if you just buffer it, like, look, you know, I love you and care for you. Like, I just wanted to communicate this to you, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way. Do you know what I mean? Like, if your partner is mature enough to understand, like, oh, okay, they're actually taking a moment for me to pick up on something. And I guess as well, we got to not be so harsh on our partners. Like, when we communicate something to them and they don't get it right once or twice, just, okay, look, they're learning. All right? Just give them some time. Yeah.
Speaking of relationships that do work, from your experience with working with your clients, have you noticed that the traditional relationship model of man the provider, woman the homemaker is more or less successful in terms of longevity of relationship versus the modern, 50-50, everything split, both people work?
Wait, it just doesn't work.
Statistically.
It doesn't work. Like, for example, I took one of my past girlfriends away on holiday, right? And she was very more on that view of, I would like to pay my way, has that sort of sense of pride and very in touch with like feminism and all this kind of stuff, which I respect. And that trip away was an example of where that ideology didn't work for us, because she quickly realized of the pace of what we were doing, going to nice restaurants, just things just like costing money. And I could see in the moment she was like sort of conflicted with like, with her views and her values based on the reality. And I was just like, look, I just want you to just switch off and just enjoy. Like,
which is why you're there.
Yeah, like, this is our break and it's my treat. And I want you to be rest assured everything's okay. So it depends on your circumstance.
But then statistically, it's more the traditional type of formation of a relationship that, from your experience and your client's experience, has worked.
Yeah. When working with a client the other day, and he was like, she said, can I get her a cab? And I said to my friend about this, and he was like, no, you should be getting her cabs all the time. And I was like, okay, but where's the advice coming from? Is that friend at the same sort of earning capacity as you are? He says, no. I go, that's his dilemma, not your dilemma. It's a strain on his life because he doesn't have that sort of level of resource to be able to do that. That's his problem, not your problem.
This just reminded me of this phrase that I've heard quite a few times now, which is, it's usually the men that don't have the money that are worried about gold diggers.
That's exactly it. Like, let's unpack gold digger. For me, I'm okay with a gold digger as long as they've got a heart. If they haven't got a heart, then I really got to assess what I'm getting.
What is even the definition? Let's put things in clear out there, because I feel like there are some terms that
perhaps is just treating you as a walking ATM machine, which there's plenty of guys that actually get off on that, by the way. Did you know, like a sugar daddy and all this kind of stuff in the world we live in. So that there is a place for that. But if you've got no respect, no love coming from it.
So basically, somebody that is purely looking for the financial aspect. That's it.
Yeah, but let's normalize that. I think we need to normalize having financial conversations in our relationships as opposed for them being taboo. It's valid. It allows you then to set goals with each other. It allows you to plan a future. I mean, this part of the podcast might not be valid for people that just want to initially meet people, but it's certainly valid for people that want to take a relationship seriously. And if you're in a partnership where you are talking about 50-50 and all this kind of stuff, then these are the sort of conversations you're going to be having, because you're going to be working out where you guys kind of are with things.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And just going back to also the whole gold digger stigma, I think the reason why I wanted to even define that is because I feel like it's being overused and also applied on women that simply are concerned about, economic situation in the relationship. It's it's a normal relationship, but they are, say, when they set out to meet somebody, financial security of that partner is important to them, and that's shunned, that's shamed. That's very often.
It's also any sort of derogatory comment always comes from a place from below. It often comes from women or men that don't have money, but women that also can't. They're envious that woman can play on that level and meet that sort of level of man.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
A woman that is encouraged by nicer things and a great way of living, that can be very motivational for a guy to have someone like that in your corner, versus someone that is just sort of passively not. I mean, I'm just speaking of what I feel. As long as they've got all the right ingredients in terms of love, affection, support, care and kind, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, of course, because obviously we've established that, okay, a gold digger is a person that, man or a woman, that is purely looking for the financial aspect in another person, completely disregarding everything else. But then if it's a person that's looking for a relationship and, looking for intellect, looking for matching values, many other things, amongst which is also some sort of drive and financial stability from the other party, I think that's just being reasonable and having basically your head screwed on. Because if you think about it, you probably wouldn't want to be with somebody that is financially inept and, unable to budget in their own lives, and chooses a partner that is unable to do the same.
It's all evolutionary psychology. Women are hardwired to be drawn towards the most resourceful man in the room. And why? Because you're going to plan a family with this person. That's where it all comes from.
This actually brings me to the other point that I wanted to ask, which is I've noticed that men tend to prioritize their work and career over a relationship until a certain point in their lives, right? When they, flip that switch and they're like, okay, I want to settle down. Whereas with women, obviously this is generalization, it doesn't apply to everyone. They tend to, from observation, prioritize and just see it as more important, the relationship. First of all, do you agree? And do you see that as well? And if so, then where's the solution to that?
So I love this question because a lot of the time, I get asked if I do matchmaking, right? And I was like, for the most part, I don't really believe in it, to be honest. I met a lot of people in the industry and I kind of know what's going on.
What is going on?
I don't really want it. It's just not the ethical way of doing things. I'd rather give someone the tools and ability to meet someone at any given moment in their life. You have to look at this, right? Why is someone going to a matchmaker, right?
They're tired, desperate.
Tired, desperate. They haven't got time. So let's look at that bit right there. They haven't got time to meet someone. So if they haven't got time to meet someone,
they don't have time for them.
Right. So the issue we need to fix there is a time management situation. So to answer your question, there has to be resource coming into the household. There has to be. There's bills that need to be paid for. There's a lifestyle that needs to be upkept. There's a family or companionship to support. So that's all valid. But we need to be better planners. And as I say this, I feel hypocritical because I'm always tested with it in my relationships and reminded, we need to plan. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I need to pull my weight a little bit on that. But if you can plan your time a lot better, then it makes up for the times that you don't have for each other. You need to put things in a diary that you can both look forward to. There's an emotion that comes through anticipation and lead up to doing something. We need to be reminded of the importance of that. Even when it just comes to dating, I think a lot of guys can relate to this as well. You're lying there and you're flicking through your options or, your pipeline, so to speak, and come over, all that, the lazy come over. But I tell you why a lot of guys are probably doing that is because
they get away with it.
At times, I'm sure they do, but they're fatigued of doing too much dating, and then they forgot about the importance of actually the courting aspect before it gets to that place. And, you know, there needs to be a reminder of that, you know, the courting aspect.
Louder.
Yeah.
Say it louder.
Yeah.
Okay, what am I forgetting in a courting process these days? The actual
Planning
courting.
a date.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think it's because of the world we're living in with the instant gratification. You know, like I can get a car at my house in 5 minutes. You know, I can get anything I want off my phone. Like,
and people are not used
groceries
to
in 5 minutes.
working extra.
That's exactly it. It's like we forget about the importance of the build-up and the waiting time to something. You know, we don't appreciate things just given to us. We just don't. Whether it be information, whether it be a gift or whatever, you know, in general, we don't appreciate things just given to us. So let's remind ourselves about the importance of waiting.
That is so true. And this immediately brings to my mind an analogy, which is, would you immediately now pluck a green apple from the tree when it's not ripe and eat it sour or like half ripe basically? Or would you actually tend to the tree and wait until it's red and shiny and glistening and juicy and sweet and then, you know, have that fruit?
And right there, that's going to help a lot of people out, because a lot of people don't really think laterally and think about the long game with someone. You know, I always often share a story where, you know, years ago, I walked into this club and I saw this girl, and instantly I was like, that's my next girlfriend. I just straight away was like, that's my next girlfriend. I hadn't even gone over and spoke to her yet and worked out how I was even going to do it. And I just knew someone like that would be getting hit up so much. And I was right, because later on down the line I saw like how much I was getting hit up. So I had that thought, let's just say that was February, and then when it came to November, she was my girlfriend. I saw her 3 times between February and November. But my thought process was exactly that. Like, why pick the apple now? Well, I can just wait for it to get juicier and riper, and then I just, you know, end of the year I just pick it off the tree.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that. And, you know, I was thinking in an analogy, in a situation that, you know, everyone encounters all the time, which is boy meets girl, and, you know, boy probably wants to sleep with the girl straight away. But if you take that time to actually get to know the person better, court her properly, she will have times 100 feelings for you when you will have invested that energy, that time, that courtship into that girl. And basically the experience, the pleasure that you will have when you actually have sex with that person finally, after you've put in that effort, is going to be so much better.
Best be right.
No, but I mean, guarantee. This is the thing that people...
You appreciate a lot more, for sure.
But of course, it feels different because of the engagement of the other person. The other person being the woman, and the woman is not going to be engaged. She's not going to be feeling anything towards you if you just, you know, rocked up overnight out of nowhere and try to make a shortcut and like cheat your way into her bedroom. Yeah,
well, I think there's a lot to be said about that though, because like, you know, a question I get thrown at me often is, should girls give it up on the first night? And I don't actually think there's a particular rule with that.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's up to the person, obviously.
Yeah, it's just got to be if they feel like they've earned it. And you can feel that connection of someone on the first night. It all depends how you behave after as well. I've met someone on the first night and that girl's become my girlfriend. I've also waited for like 2 months.
It's not one size fits all. That's definitely true. No. There are those moments when you meet somebody and you're like, okay, this is the love of my life. Nothing else matters. Those happen. Yeah, definitely. But going back to the question, which is, so say, you know, women have this tendency to prioritize relationship. Men have this tendency to prioritize careers. When they communicate and when they get together, how do they structure that relationship so that it's clear and so that they find that common ground there?
Are we talking about time management still? Like how to do that?
Is it all about time management?
Well, I think one side of the question is like sharing common goals with each other, so you can understand your partner's sacrifice of time for the greater good. But 2 is actually, like, I think when you're single, like, you're just giving away your time to all sorts of work purposes because you haven't really got anyone else to consider in your life. An adjustment I have with my clients is like, okay, well, that way of living your life needs to be adapted now, because you can't just keep saying, oh, I'm busy, I can't do it, then I can't. Like, you've got a person to think about in your life now. So we need to move a few things around.
So essentially, the man in this case, you know, if we're talking about those roles, he must, first of all, want to have that relationship and then be ready to make the sacrifices that are needed and the adjustments that are needed. Otherwise, it becomes a burden and it doesn't work.
Yeah, and again, like...
So they need to be intentional about it as well.
100%. I mean, like, obviously it's just not going to work, right? You're not going to be seeing each other. Just going to be lumbered with the work excuse or I'm busy excuse. It's just like, we're all busy, but what do you want to be busy doing?
You've obviously contributed a lot to your client's life, and you're sharing this wonderful knowledge on how to have better relationships. But there are people that do the opposite, such as Andrew Tate.
Right. Okay.
I'm bringing him up because,
that, right?
Yeah, we're getting literally into that because obviously he's not a dating coach, but he's very opinionated on man-woman relationships. And that has had very strong repercussions in the public culture, especially in youth's view of the opposite sex. What's your opinion on him and what he's doing?
Hi there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. You can listen to the full audio version for free on your favorite podcast app. And if you are enjoying this video version, I invite you to join my exclusive Patreon community to support the making of the show and to unlock a ton of exclusive content, such as the full video episodes, bloopers, some controversial topics, and more personal questions from the guests, and much more. Link is in the description below.